Sometimes the best families come from the toughest beginnings. Sometimes love grows even when people think it's silly. 27 years ago, folks in Bitter Range saw a mountain man named Cormac Judd marry a poor woman named Elsa Ray. The townspeople chuckled and said it was the worst match ever. A rugged guy and a woman with nothing but rough hands and big dreams. They bet it wouldn't last past winter. They thought she'd run back to town in a month, but they didn't get what Cormac saw in Elsa. He didn't want a fancy wife or a pretty face. He needed someone tough enough to face a hard world with him. Now, 27 years later, the Judd family is respected across 3 counties. What happened in those years that turned laughs into respect? Before we go back, tell us where you're listening from. And if this story grabs you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something really cool for you. The fall wind sliced through Bitter Range like a knife, hinting at an early winter. From the big porch of the Judd family's home, you could see across the valley to where the mountains stood like old guards, their tops already snowy. Cormac Judd stood there, holding a cold coffee cup, watching the morning light turn the land, gold and orange. At 52, Cormac moved with the calm strength of a man who'd earned every wrinkle and scar. His shoulders, still strong under a wool shirt Elsa had fixed many times, carried the weight of leading a family that started with nothing. His hair, mostly gray now, waved in the breeze as he looked over the land he'd worked his whole life for. The homestead spread out like proof of hard work. The main house, built with logs he'd cut himself, stood sturdy and warm, with smoke curling from its stone chimney. To the east, the barn held their cows, which grazed on fields they'd cleared from wild land, and horses that knew the mountain, paths like people. Past that, the workshop rang with the sound of their oldest son Silas hammering at his blacksmith forge. This wasn't always his view. 27 years ago, Cormac was a loner, living in a tiny cabin high in the mountains, only coming to town when he had to. He earned respect by being quiet and good at what he did, guiding hunters through dangerous paths, finding lost travelers, and surviving winters that beat weaker men. The townsfolk admired his skills but thought he was odd, a guy who could vanish into the wild for months and come back like nothing happened. In his hand, he held his grandfather's Winchester rifle, its wood smoothed by 3 generations of Judd men. That gun had fed his family, protected their land, and got them through tough times when a steady hand meant survival. His grandfather carried it when settlers first came, when the line between safe and wild was blurry and risky. His father used it to guard their first home before things fell apart and the family scattered. Now it was in Cormac's weathered hands, linking past and present. Footsteps on the porch made him turn. Elsa stood beside him, moving quietly, reading his mood from how he stood. At 49, her beauty came from strength, not youth, shaped by years of hard living. Her dark hair, with bits of silver, was tied back simply. Her dress, one of 3 she owned, was clean and neatly patched by a woman who never wasted anything. "There's fresh coffee if you want some warm," she said, leaning on the porch rail. Her voice had a slight accent from her native language, which some townsfolk once used to judge her. Cormac took the hot cup she offered, their fingers touching briefly, a small moment that still felt big after 27 years together. "Silas is up early again," he said, nodding toward the forge's sound. "That boy's got your hard work and my stubborn streak," Elsa said with a little smile. "Could be great or trouble, depending on how you see it." Their oldest son, Silas, at 27, had his dad's quiet strength and his mom's never-give-up spirit. As a blacksmith, he was respected across the county for good work and fair deals. But those who knew him saw he kept a tight lid on a temper that could blaze like his forge when stirred. "Levi rode out to check the north field before dawn," Elsa added, settling on the rail. "Wanted to count the cows before the weather gets bad." Levi, their second son, at 24, was the family's protector, always ready to guard what they'd built. While Silas poured his energy into crafting, Levi showed his through watchfulness and strength. He never lost a fight, not because he looked for them, but because in Bitter Range, strength respected strength and weakness invited trouble. "Elias took the wagon to town this morning," Elsa said. Said he's trading, but I bet he's also listening for news. Their third son, at 22, had the sharpest mind in the family. Elias could read people and situations so well it sometimes spooked folks. He knew information was as valuable as gold when used right. His gray eyes missed nothing, and he could be sharp-tongued when needed. "And Asher?" Cormac asked, though he knew the answer. "Still sleeping?" Elsa said with a fond tone, like only a mom could when talking about her youngest. "Not for long, though. He's restless, wanting to prove himself." At 19, Asher was the wild card in the family. Stronger than most men twice his age, he had his brother's gifts, but hadn't found his focus yet. He hated being the youngest, eager to show he could stand with men who'd already proved themselves. Cormac sipped his coffee and looked over the empire they'd built from nothing. The land stretched miles, marked by fences he and his sons had set, dotted with buildings they'd raised. Cows with the Judd brand grazed on land they'd cleared and worked. It was a fortune in animals, land, and buildings, wealth built slowly through years of tough work and careful planning. But it was more than land. It was proof of what two people could do when they believed in each other and ignored others' doubts. Every fence post, every building, every harvest was a win against those who said they'd fail. "Do you ever think about those early days?" Elsa asked softly, like she could read his mind. Cormac watched a hawk circle over the valley. "Every day," he said. "Hard not to when you're surrounded by what we built. Those early days were brutal, beyond just hard work." Their first cabin was tiny, 12 feet square with a dirt floor and walls that let in the wind. They had little more than their clothes, a few tools, and the grit to prove everyone wrong. That first winter nearly broke them, not from cold or hunger, but from feeling so alone and knowing failure would prove the naysayers right. "I was scared," Elsa said so quietly he leaned closer to hear. "Not of you, never you, but of letting you down, of proving them right." Her honesty surprised him, though it shouldn't have. Elsa always faced tough truths head-on. One reason he loved her from the start. "You never showed it," he said. "I couldn't. Neither could we." She was right. Back then, doubt was a luxury they couldn't afford. Every day demanded total belief they could succeed where others expected failure. There was no room for second-guessing, no time for feeling sorry, just work to be done. Hoofbeats interrupted them. Levi rode up through the morning mist, sitting straighter in the saddle than usual, looking tense. He jumped off his horse with the ease of someone who'd spent most of his life riding. His resemblance to Cormac was strong. Same broad shoulders, same careful movements that showed strength held back. But while Cormac's eyes had learned patience, Levi's burned with a need to fix problems and face challenges. "We've got trouble," he said straight out, his voice making people listen. "Found tracks by the north fence. Boot prints and horse hooves, not ours. Someone's been watching us." Cormac put down his coffee. The morning's peace was gone. In Bitter Range, strangers snooping usually meant trouble. How many? At least 3, maybe 4. They stayed in the trees, but they could see the whole north field and the house. Elsa moved closer to Cormac, not scared, but ready, to stand together like they'd done for 27 years. "Any idea how long they were there?" Cormac asked. "Tracks are fresh, probably last night, maybe this morning." Levi's jaw tightened. They didn't hide their tracks well. Either they're sloppy or they wanted us to know they were there. That idea felt like a cold wind. People who wanted to be noticed usually had a message, and it wasn't friendly. In a place like Bitter Range, where the nearest sheriff was a day's ride away, such visits often meant demands for money, threats to the land, or worse. "Where are your brothers?" Cormac asked. "Silas is at the forge. I told him to stay sharp. Asher's probably still sleeping. Elias should be back from town soon." Cormac nodded, his mind racing through plans. The homestead was built for defense, though they hoped never to need it. The house had clear views all around. The barn could be a backup stronghold, and the workshop offered cover and tools that could be weapons. "We'll wait and see what they want," he decided, "but we'll be ready for anything." As if on cue, wagon wheels sounded from the town road. Elias pulled up in the freight wagon. his usual calm replaced by urgency. He jumped down fast. "We need to talk," he said, his gray eyes flicking between his parents and brother. "All of us. There's news from town that changes everything." The morning calm of the Judd homestead was over. The family gathered in the main room, used as a kitchen, dining area, and meeting spot for 27 years. Elsa poured coffee while the men sat around the heavy oak table Cormac built in their second winter. The morning light seemed dimmer. Now, like storm clouds, were already gathering. Elias pulled a folded paper from his coat, its official look grabbing attention. It had the territorial government's seal, but parts were torn, maybe on purpose. "This showed up at the land office yesterday," Elias said, smoothing it on the table. "A guy named Marcus Whitmore from Denver claims he owns our land, from the creek to the ridge." Silence hit hard. Levi leaned in, his face darkening as he read. Silas, fresh from the forge in his leather apron, stood behind his dad, arms crossed. Asher, woken by the noise, stood in the doorway looking confused, trying to catch up. "Prior rights?" Cormac's voice was dangerously quiet, a tone his sons knew to respect. "We've worked this land for 27 years, built everything ourselves." "That's what I told the clerk," Elias said. "But Whitmore's got papers saying his family got this land in 1851, before we ever came here." Elsa studied the torn paper like she used to study their few books in early winters. She wasn't schooled much, but her mind was sharp, spotting odd details in ranch documents. "Something's off," she said softly. "The dates don't match, and the paper looks different in spots, like someone added parts later." Levi held the paper to the light. "She's right. This part's got different ink, different writing." "Forgery?" Silas asked, his blacksmith's eye catching small flaws. "Maybe," Elias said. "But proving it's fake could be tough. Whitmore's got good lawyers and money to back his claim." The situation felt heavy, like a thick blanket. A legal fight for their land threatened everything they'd built. Without the land, they'd lose their cows, their buildings, and the family would scatter. "What's the town saying?" Cormac asked, though he half knew the answer. Elias glanced at his brothers. "Some folks remember how hard you and Ma worked. They think it's wrong for someone to take it after all these years. Others, they remember when people laughed at the mountain man and his poor wife. They're wondering if Whitmore's got a point, if maybe our claim wasn't legit from the start." That stung, but Cormac expected it. Even with all they'd achieved, some still saw them as the unlikely couple doomed to fail. Success was harder for some to forgive than failure. "There's more," Elias said slowly. "Whitmore's not just filing papers. He showed up in town with 6 men, professional types, staying at the hotel, asking about our ranch." "What kind of questions?" Levi's voice had an edge, like when he sensed a threat. "About our land boundaries, water rights, how many cows we have, where we sell them. Stuff you'd want to know if you're planning to take over a ranch." Asher finally spoke from the doorway. "So what do we do? Just sit here and let them steal everything?" The question hung like smoke from a bad fire. Everyone knew their answer would shape not just their future, but who they were as a family that always faced trouble head-on. Cormac stood and looked out the window at the land he'd poured his life into. Every fence, every building, every cow with the Judd brand was a piece of their dream. "We fight," he said simply. "But we fight smart. Elias, you handle the legal stuff. Dig up everything on Whitmore and his claim. Look for anything we can use to fight his papers." Elias nodded, already thinking of contacts to chase. "Levi, you're on security. If they're watching us, we watch them back. No fights unless they start it. We can't give them a reason to call us the bad guys." "Got it," Levi said, though his face said he'd rather take a direct swing. "Silas, keep the forge going and be ready to make anything we need. Tools, gear, whatever gives us an edge. Spread the word through your customers. We need to know who's with us." Silas nodded, his blacksmith connections a web of farmers and ranchers who could be key allies. "What about me?" Asher asked, sounding a bit desperate. Cormac studied, his youngest son. At 19, Asher had the strength but not the experience. This fight could shape him. "You're with me," Cormac said. "We'll get this place ready for anything, and I'll teach you everything I know about surviving and planning." Elsa stayed quiet, But her silence wasn't weakness. She was thinking, planning, seeing angles the others might miss. "What about the townsfolk?" she asked. "People who saw us start from nothing might speak up if they know what's at stake." It was a smart point. Legal papers mattered, but neighbors' stories could back their claim and sway local officials. "Good idea," Cormac said. "You know those people best. If anyone can get them on our side, it's you." They spent the next hour going over details, refining their plan. The torn paper lay on the table like a challenge, its seals and legal words a threat that felt both vague and real. If Whitmore won, they'd lose not just their land, but who they were. A family that beat every obstacle together. As they split up, Cormac stayed with the paper, studying the flaws Elsa and Levi spotted. They were small but real, the kind that could matter if looked at closely. But even if they proved it was fake, they'd still face a rich opponent with big-shot lawyers. Horses approaching pulled him to the window. 3 riders came at a steady pace, their sharp look marking them as the men Elias mentioned. They rode, pricey horses, and moved like people used to, getting their way with money and threats. Cormac stepped onto the porch as they stopped at a safe distance. The leader, a man in his 40s who looked more like a talker than a worker, got off his horse with a folder under his arm. "Mr. Judd," he said, "I'm Harrison Pike, representing Marcus Whitmore about this land." His polite but firm tone carried the weight of official business. "I'm here to give you notice of Mr. Whitmore's claim and tell you you've got 30 days to leave peacefully. After that, we'll force you out through the courts." Cormac took the papers without a word, his face hiding the anger burning inside. 30 days to abandon everything they'd built, everything that made them a family. "Also," Pike added, "Mr. Whitmore's willing to pay for your improvements and buy your cows at fair prices. Just agree he owns the land and leave quietly." The offer sounded fair to outsiders, but Cormac saw it as a trick to make their loss look willing and legal. "And if we say no?" he asked quietly. Pike's face got harder. "Then the courts decide. Legal fights are costly and risky. Mr. Whitmore has deep pockets and his claim looks strong." The threat was polite but clear. Give in or face a fight that could leave them broke and homeless. Cormac tucked the papers into his shirt. "We'll be in touch," he said simply. Pike nodded and got back on his horse. "I hope you think about Mr. Whitmore's kind offer, Mr. Judd. It'd be a shame if this got messy." The riders left at the same steady pace, leaving Cormac with the weight of their ultimatum. 30 days to give up everything or face a rich enemy with no morals. Inside, he heard his family talking, their voices tense but also stubborn, the kind of grit that got them through every crisis. The paper in Pike's folder might back Whitmore's claim, but it also showed some fights were worth having, no matter the odds. The steady clang of Silas's hammer was like the homestead's heartbeat, but now it had a new urgency. Silas swung his dad's old hammer with skill, each hit shaping iron and their fight against this sudden threat. The hammer told a story, worn smooth by 3 generations. Its head was balanced from years of use, its handle dark with sweat and work. Cormac had used it learning from his dad before the family split apart. Now Silas held it, linking past and present, a sign of skills and traditions kept alive. "You're hitting that iron like it owes you something," said a voice from the forge door. Silas looked up to see Thomas Brennan, a rancher whose land touched the Judds to the south. Brennan, in his 50s, came to Bitter Range around the same time as Cormac and Elsa, but had money and connections that made his start easier. "Just keeping up with orders," Silas said, setting down the hammer and wiping his hand. "What brings you here, Tom?" Brennan stepped into the workshop, looking at the busy mess of tools and projects. The forge glowed, casting shadows, and filling the air with the smell of hot metal and coal. "Heard you might have trouble," Brennan said carefully. "Thought you could use a friend." In this country, friend meant something, where neighbors miles apart relied on each other to survive. Silas studied Brennan's face, seeing real concern, but also curiosity. "Depends on what you heard," Silas said cautiously. "That some guy from Denver says your pa never owned this land legally, that he's got papers saying it's all his." News spread fast in small towns, especially if it involved drama. Silas wasn't shocked it got out, but he wanted to know how people were taking it. "That's about it," he said. "Guy named Whitmore showed up with papers that look real, but we think they might be fake." Brennan nodded, his weathered face showing he'd seen tricky problems before. "Your pa's always been honest. Can't say that for every new guy with fancy papers and big claims." His support was nice, but Silas knew not everyone felt the same. For every Brennan who remembered Cormac's honesty, others recalled when the Judds were seen as doomed. "We're fighting it in court," Silas said, "but it'll cost a lot, and Whitmore's got money." "That's what worries me," Brennan said. "A guy with that cash doesn't pick one homestead unless he's got bigger plans. Makes me wonder what's next." It was a sharp point. If Whitmore took the Judd land, he could set a pattern that threatened other families with shaky papers. This wasn't just their fight. It could affect everyone. "Think others would help?" Silas asked. "Some will, some won't. Folks remember your parents' hard work, but they also remember the old talk about whether a mountain man and a poor woman could make it." That honesty hurt, but was needed. Silas grew up knowing their success came despite the town's doubts. Their wealth had earned respect, but it didn't erase early skepticism. "What'd get more people on our side?" Silas asked. Brennan looked at a horseshoe Silas was making, perfectly shaped with care that built his reputation. "Proof," he said. "Something solid showing Whitmore's playing dirty. People might ignore a shady claim if it's just one family, but if their own land's at risk, they'll care." It was good advice, matching Silas's thoughts. Winning the town meant showing Whitmore's threat wasn't just to them, but to everyone's security. Over the next few days, Silas's shop became a news hub. Customers bringing horseshoes or tools shared gossip, letting him gauge the town's mood and spread their side. Some, who dealt with the Judds for years, were angry at Whitmore's move, seeing it as stealing hard-earned success. Others stayed neutral, waiting to see who'd win. A few seemed almost glad, as if Whitmore's claim proved their old doubts about the Judds. Those folks didn't say it outright, but Silas saw it in their vague comments and avoided glances. "Notice how people act different now?" Asher asked. One night, helping Silas tidy the shop, Silas had seen it. Talk stopping when they walked up, customers rushing through business, neighbors waving from afar. "Fear makes folks careful," Silas said. "They don't want to pick sides till they know who's winning." "They should know us by now. Trust we're right," Asher said, showing his youth. At 19, he thought right and wrong were clear, that good people backed good causes. But life was messier, shaped by self-interest and avoiding fights. "Knowing and trusting aren't the same," Silas explained, "especially with money and legal trouble." The shop grew quiet, just the wind outside. Both brothers knew they faced not just a court fight, but a test of their community ties and reputation. The outcome would decide if they kept their land and their place in town. "Pa wants me to learn survival and strategy," Asher said after a pause. "But I think the real lesson is figuring out who we can count on when things get rough." It was a grown-up thought from someone usually focused on proving his strength. This crisis was shaping Asher, making him see beyond courage to judgment and human nature. "That's the toughest lesson," Silas agreed, "and the most important." Days passed, the forge's rhythm steady but tinged with loneliness. The Judds were learning that success and respect didn't guarantee help when it meant risk for others, but there were good signs, too. Brennan kept coming back, sharing news of other ranchers worried about Whitmore's precedent. A small group of supporters was forming, people who saw that letting one family's rights get crushed could threaten everyone. The hammer rang on the anvil, shaping iron and their resolve. Whatever came, the Judds would face it with the skills that got them through every challenge, sure that some fights were worth it, no matter the cost. Elias spread his ledger book on the kitchen table, its worn pages holding 27 years of careful records. Every deal, every improvement, every penny spent on the land was written in his neat handwriting, showing their rise from nothing to wealth. The ledger wasn't just numbers. It was proof they owned the land through years of work. Each line told a story: buying their first bull in 1855, materials for the house in 1860, payments to neighbors for harvest help, cattle sales to Denver and Colorado Springs. Look here, Elias said, pointing to a column. We've put over $15,000 into this land. Buildings, fences, cows, tools, all recorded. Cormac looked over his son's shoulder, amazed at the detail he'd often ignored. Elias started the books at 16, showing a knack for numbers that helped as their ranch grew. This should help in court, Cormac said. Hard to say we don't own it when we've got proof of all we've done. It's more than that, Elias said, flipping to another page. These show we've paid taxes on this land since 1854. Every year, no misses. If Whitmore's family owned it, why didn't they pay taxes? Where's their proof? The questions pointed to holes in Whitmore's claim that a smart lawyer could use. A real owner would have records of taxes, improvements, and work. No records meant a weak claim. Elsa joined them, bringing coffee and her sharp focus. She'd learned business from managing their home and helping with ranch choices. She might not know law, but she knew fairness and evidence. What about people who saw us start? She asked. Folks who watched us build from nothing. That's what I'm thinking, Elias said. Old Peterson at the store has records back to territorial days. He can confirm when we started buying stuff for big projects. And Doc Williams, who delivered us boys, can say how long we've been here. It was a good plan. Combine their records with neighbors' stories to prove they'd earned the land. But they knew they were up against a richer opponent. I was in town yesterday, Elias said, digging into Whitmore. It's not good news. He opened another part of the ledger with notes on their enemy. The info was spotty but worrying. Whitmore's not just some rich guy with a shady claim. He's done this in Colorado and Wyoming, shows up with old papers claiming land others improved, offers to buy cheap, and if that fails, ties them up in court till they give up. That changed everything. They weren't just fighting for their land. They were facing a guy who made a business of stealing from settlers. How many families? Cormac asked. At least 6 I know of, maybe more. Some fought and lost everything. Others took his low offers to avoid ruin. Either way, Whitmore got valuable land cheap. The news was both hopeful and scary. It showed a pattern that could hurt Whitmore's credibility, but it also meant he'd won enough to make it profitable, hinting at weak laws or crooked courts. What happened to those who fought? Elsa asked softly. Elias paused, not wanting to scare his parents. Most lost their land and left the territory. Legal costs ate their money, and even when they showed problems with Whitmore's papers, courts sided with the better lawyers. The silence was heavy. Fighting Whitmore could cost not just their land, but their whole future. Losing could leave them broke, starting over when it was nearly impossible, but giving in meant letting a bully win and saying their hard work didn't matter. There's more, Elias said, flipping to his last notes. I talked to a lawyer in town, Mitchell, who's done property fights. He thinks our case is strong, but says it'll be tough. What kind? Cormac asked. Cost, mostly. This could drag on for months, maybe years. Legal fees could hit thousands, win or lose. And even with good proof, the courts might not side with us. The money problem was real. They were well off, but their wealth was in land and cows, not cash they could use for a long court fight. Mitchell said we might consider a deal, Elias said slowly, not taking Whitmore's offer, but agreeing to keep some land while giving him the rest. The idea hung like bad smoke. It might make sense to cut losses, but it would betray everything they'd worked for. No way, Cormac said firmly. This land is ours. We earned it with 27 years of sweat. I won't give up an inch to a thief with fancy lawyers. Elsa put her hand on his, showing they were in this together. We've faced worse odds. Everyone said we'd fail at the start. They were wrong then, and Whitmore's wrong now. Asher walked in from chores, his presence a reminder this fight was for the next generation, too. Giving up would teach their sons that money and lawyers could beat hard work. What can I do? Asher asked, sitting by Elias. Elias looked up, a plan forming. You're great with horses and know this land better than most. I need you to ride to Colorado Springs, maybe Denver, to find families Whitmore hurt. Get their stories. Maybe get them to testify. It was a big, risky job, needing weeks of tough travel, but it was their best shot to show Whitmore's dirty tricks and build a case about fraud, not just land. "When do I go?" Asher asked. No hesitation. His quick agreement showed he was growing up, ready for a job needing skill and judgment. "Give me a few days to find the best leads," Elias said. "I want to make sure you're not riding into dead ends." The ledger stayed open, its pages proof of their honest work, but they knew papers alone might not save them. The fight would need everything: money, law, and grit, used smartly against a guy who'd ruined families for profit. The next weeks would test all they'd learned about surviving and sticking together when the world wanted to break them. But they'd face it with the same stubborn heart that beat every challenge. Sure, some principles were worth defending, no matter what. Deep in the homestead's foundation, under loose stones Cormac set years ago, Elsa found a faded photo that changed everything. Wrapped in oiled leather and old silk, it showed two people by a small cabin, a man with Cormac's jaw and a woman with gentle eyes hiding old secrets. Elsa found it searching for papers to help their case, checking old trunks and hidden spots when she felt the loose stones in the root cellar. "Cormac," she called, her voice tight. "You need to see this." He found her holding the photo, her hands shaking a bit. The picture was old, from when photos were new, with stiff poses and clothes from the 1840s. "Who are they?" Elsa asked quietly. Cormac looked, his face showing both recognition and confusion. The man looked so much like him they could be brothers, but the clothes and setting were before he came to Bitter Rain. "I think it's my parents," he said slowly. "But that's not right. They never lived here. We were in Missouri when I was a kid." Under the photo, Elsa found papers, a deed to Bitter Range land from 1849, signed by territorial officials with the name James Judd, plus survey maps showing boundaries, covering their homestead and thousands more acres in the mountains, and letters in a woman's neat writing about early settler life. It was huge. If real, these papers meant Cormac's parents had a legal claim years before he homesteaded. He wasn't just a guy who worked hard. He was reclaiming family land. "Why didn't you know?" Elsa asked, spreading the maps on the cellar floor. Cormac shook his head, trying to match this with his childhood memories. Pa never talked about his past. Said some things were better buried. Ma died when I was young, and Pa wanted to get far from whatever happened before. The letters gave clues, written by Sarah Judd to her sister in Ohio. They told of building a homestead in Colorado's mountains, mixing grit with growing worry as harsh winters hit hard. "James is working himself to death," one letter said. "The land's good, but tough, and we're so far from help I sometimes think we messed up. Little Cormac's strong, though, with his pa's stubborn streak, thriving where others would break." Another letter, 2 years later, showed the tragedy that shaped Cormac's childhood. "The fever took James 3 days ago. I'm alone, with Cormac, and winter's coming. I don't know if we can make it. My brother wants us to go back to Missouri, and I'm starting to agree." The last letter, in a shaky hand, explained why Cormac grew up not knowing his Colorado roots. "I'm taking my brother's offer. This place has taken too much. I'm packing what we can carry and leaving the rest. Maybe one day Cormac will come back to claim what's his, but I can't let this place kill us both." Elsa looked up, tears in her eyes. "She left to save you, but kept the papers valid in case you came back." The papers told of tragedy, survival, and unfinished dreams waiting decades. James and Sarah Judd had a legal claim to thousands of acres, but life forced them to leave before they could finish. Now their son had returned, building on land that was always his family's. "This changes everything," Cormac said, his voice heavy with a new view of his life. "If these are real, Whitmore's claim is nothing. Our family owned this land over 30 years ago, but they knew proving old papers in court would be hard. The photo and letters were strong, but they'd need official records and witnesses to hold up." "We need to tell the boys," Elsa said, gathering the papers, "and get these to Elias for our case." They left the cellar and headed to the house, carrying pieces of a puzzle that changed their fight. The homestead looked the same, but now it wasn't just land they'd claimed, it was a family legacy waiting to be taken back. Inside, their 4 sons were at the kitchen table, talking about security and plans against Whitmore. They stopped when Cormac and Elsa walked in with the new finds. "We found something," Cormac said, setting the photo on the table. The reaction was big. Silas leaned in, his blacksmith's eye checking the photo's age and craft, seeing it looked real. Levi studied the papers like they were evidence in a life-or-death fight. Elias saw the legal power right away, while Asher stared at grandparents he never knew he had. "These are your parents?" Silas asked quietly. "I think so. And if these papers are real, they prove our family owned this land since 1849, way before Whitmore's claim." Elias took the papers, spreading them carefully, studying each page like it held their future. The deed, maps, and letters showed a legal claim older than Whitmore's. "This is huge," Elias said. "If we prove these are real, Whitmore's case falls apart. We've got prior claim and family ownership for over 30 years. "Big if," Levi said. "How do we prove papers this old are legit?" It was the key question. They looked real, but court would need experts and proof. "Land office records," Elias said, thinking fast. "If Pa's dad filed these, there should be copies in the territorial archives. Surveys, taxes, maybe letters with officials." "What about witnesses?" Asher asked. "People who might remember the old days?" Cormac thought, looking at his parents' photo. "Most folks from then are gone, but some might recall stories about early settlers." They talked for hours, planning how to use the new evidence. The papers were a lifeline, but they raised questions about family history and why they'd been cut off from their legacy. As evening came and the sons went to their tasks, Cormac stayed with the photo. The faces seemed to carry hope and warning. Hope, their sacrifice wasn't wasted. Warning that land came with costs beyond money. "They'd be proud," Elsa said, joining him. "Your parents would love what you built on their start." "I wish I'd known," Cormac said. "All these years thinking I started from nothing when I was picking up where they left off." "Maybe that's why it worked," Elsa said. "If you knew it was yours, you might have felt entitled instead of earning it. The man who built this had to do it himself, not lean on what others did." It was a deep thought that changed their whole story. The mountain man and poor woman mocked by the town were the true heir to a big land claim and a woman whose strength was proven through years of struggle. Their success wasn't a fluke. It was fulfilling a destiny waiting for the right people. The faded photo sat between them, linking past and present, dreams paused and dreams achieved. Tomorrow would bring new fights against Whitmore, but tonight they had something new. The certainty their fight was about honoring what their family was meant to do. Elsa's worn Bible had been her friend for 27 years, its pages holding dried flowers from their wedding, birth dates in neat writing, and verses marked for tough or happy times. Tonight, as she sat in lamplight preparing for a town meeting that could decide their fate, the Bible was more than faith. It held their family story and the values that got them through every crisis. In Psalms, she found the wildflowers from the meadow where she and Cormac said their vows before a preacher and 3 witnesses. The simple wedding was mocked as a desperate match, but time showed it was the start of something stronger than convenience. The town hall in Bitter Range had never seen a meeting like this. Word spread that the Judds would share their case, asking for help against Whitmore's claim. Some neighbors stood with them, others stayed neutral, and a few seemed eager to see the family that rose so high fall. Cormac sat across from Elsa, reviewing his speech, written in the careful handwriting of a man who learned to read and write late. Each word was chosen carefully, knowing lives depended on his words. "You don't need those notes," Elsa said softly. "You know what to say. Just speak from your heart, like always." He looked up, his gray eyes showing worry about stakes. "Higher than ever. 27 years ago, half those people laughed when we got married. Tonight, I need to convince them to risk their own safety to help us." "They're not the same as back then," Elsa said. "And neither are we. We've all learned what matters." Wagons and horses approached, showing neighbors were arriving. Each one there was a small act of courage, joining a fight that could affect everyone. Silas appeared in the doorway in his best shirt, looking serious. "Wagon's ready when you are. Levi's in town, making sure Whitmore's men don't cause trouble." It was a needed precaution. Whitmore's hired men had been around town talking to people, making it clear that helping the Judds was meddling in legal business. The intimidation was subtle, but worked, reminding folks powerful people were watching. "Where's Asher?" Cormac asked. "In town with Elias, setting up our evidence so people can see the papers we found." They'd decided to show everything. Ledger, books, tax records, and the new papers proving their old claim. Court would decide ownership, but town support could sway officials and protect others from similar fights. The ride to town was quiet, each lost in thoughts of what might happen. The setting sun painted the mountains gold and purple, the valley beautiful and worth fighting for. The town hall was packed, families sitting in groups showing who was with who. The Brennans sat up front, their presence a sign of support from big ranchers who saw the bigger picture. Smaller farmers and workers filled the seats looking curious, worried, or calculating. At the back, Pike and two of Whitmore's men watched like it was just business. Their fancy clothes and cool confidence showed this was just part of a bigger plan. Thomas Brennan, known for fairness, ran the meeting since he wasn't directly involved. He started it, explaining they were there to hear the Judds' case and decide if the town should act. Cormac stood and walked to the front, carrying himself, with the quiet respect he'd earned in Bitter Range. He faced neighbors, friends, and skeptics, knowing his next words could shape their future and their place in town. 27 years ago, he began, his voice clear in the full room. Most of you thought you saw a mistake. A mountain man who lived alone was marrying a poor woman with nothing but willing hands and a strong back. People said it wouldn't last a season. They called us fools for thinking we could build something from nothing. He faced the old doubts directly, taking away their power to hurt his plea for help. You were wrong then, and Marcus Whitmore's wrong now. Elsa and I didn't succeed because of luck or advantages. We succeeded because we knew something worth saying again. Hard work, fair deals, and caring for our town mean more than money or sneaky laws. He pointed to the table where Elias set up their proof, ledgers of decades of work, tax records showing steady ownership, and the new papers proving their family's old claim. These show what we've done together. $15,000 in improvements, taxes paid every year, a ranch that gives jobs and helps the whole valley. This isn't just about our land. It's about whether 27 years of honest work can be stolen by someone with cash for lawyers and fake papers. The word fake stirred the crowd, people leaning in to hear more. Pike started to stand, maybe to argue, but Brennan waved him down during the talk. We've learned Marcus Whitmore's done this before, Cormac said. At least 6 families in Colorado and Wyoming lost their land the same way. Shady papers show up when land gets valuable, just in time for costly court fights. Elsa watched her husband, his words strong with the truth of their life. He backed every point with clear examples and solid proof. But this isn't just about us, Cormac said, his voice stronger with feeling. If Whitmore wins here, who's next? How many of you have perfect papers for land you've worked? For years? How many could afford a court fight against someone with endless money? The questions made everyone think about their own risks against a guy like Whitmore. We're asking for your help, Cormac finished. Not as a favor, but because what threatens one family threatens us all. Stand with us now, and we'll stand with you later. His 10-minute speech said everything needed about their fight and their call for town unity. As he sat by Elsa, the room buzzed with talk as neighbors weighed what they heard and what they'd risk. Brennan opened the floor, starting a process to show how much the town really backed the Judds and their fight against forces threatening everyone's security. Asher found a hidden will under a loose floorboard in the old cabin where Cormac and Elsa first lived, now a storage shed. His search for more papers paid off when he felt the board move differently. Wrapped in oiled cloth and sealed with a ring's wax mark, the will was official, with territorial seals, dated 1850, from when Cormac's parents claimed Bitter Range. "Pa, you need to see this," Asher called, his voice urgent, bringing Cormac and Elsa to the cabin. The will was long, with legal words that took time to understand, but its point was clear. James Judd wasn't just a homesteader. He was the heir to big land holdings in Colorado, given to his father, Colonel Robert Judd, for military service in the Mexican-American War. "This can't be right," Cormac said, shocked. If my grandpa owned all this, why'd we grow up poor in Missouri? The will explained, revealing family history. James was the younger son of Colonel Robert Judd, who died in 1850, leaving his estate to James and his older brother, Marcus. "Marcus," Elsa said sharply. "Marcus Judd, not Whitmore." The truth hit them all. Their enemy wasn't a random guy with fake papers. He was Cormac's uncle, thinking he was the only heir. The will said the land was to be split evenly. James taking Bitter Range, Marcus getting richer valley land. "Look here," Asher said, pointing to a key part. "If either brother died without sons, his share goes to the other's family." Marcus thought James died childless, making him the sole heir. He waited years to claim it, thinking improvements raised its value. "He doesn't know you exist," Elsa said. "He thinks his brother had no kids, so he's the only heir." It changed everything. Marcus wasn't stealing. He believed the land was his. His fake papers were his way to claim what he thought was rightfully his. "Why use Whitmore?" Cormac asked. Asher found letters between the brothers, showing a fight over the estate. Marcus said James was foolish for choosing wild land, while James defended his choice. The last letter, before James's death, explained it. "If you keep this up, Marcus, you're no brother of mine. Take the Whitmore name from our ma if you're ashamed of Pa's work, but this land will go to my sons, and no money or lawyers will change that." "He changed his name," Cormac said. "After Pa died, thinking he got everything, he used Whitmore to hide the family tie. The find turned their fight from a land dispute into a family drama brewing for over 30 years. Marcus built wealth as Whitmore, believing his brother's land was his. Now, with proof James had a son, he was fighting to keep control of land legally Cormac's. "We need to tell the others," Elsa said, gathering the papers. "This changes our plan." Back at the house, Elias was writing to lawyers and witnesses. The new papers had strengthened their case, but the will and Marcus's real identity opened new possibilities. "You won't believe this," Cormac said as his sons gathered. Explaining took an hour, each studying the will and papers, grappling with what it meant. The legal impact was huge. They had clear title to their land and maybe thousands more acres. "So, we're rich?" Asher asked, focusing on the obvious. "We're legit," Elias corrected. "Rich is different, and claiming all this land could take years in court, but our case is way stronger now." Levi looked at the maps, thinking like a strategist. "This means Marcus has more to lose. If we prove he's used a fake name and fake papers, he could face jail." "That's why he's so pushy," Silas said. "He knows the family tie and wants to win before we figure out our real rights." They spent the evening planning, moving from defending their land to challenging Marcus's whole game. "We need to be careful," Cormac warned. "A guy who hid his name for 30 years has a lot to lose. If he knows we know who he is, he might get desperate." "What'll he do?" Elsa asked. Cormac looked at his parents' photo. "He'll try to destroy the evidence and anyone who can talk against him. A man who's gone this far won't quit easy, especially when it's his whole life's work." The will sat on the table, a secret waiting decades to change everything. Tomorrow would bring new fights, but tonight, the Judds had the truth about their roots and their rightful place in their family's legacy. But that truth brought new dangers. Marcus, as Whitmore, wouldn't give up his power easily. The fight ahead would be personal, maybe more dangerous than anything before, pitting family against family over identity, rights, and which Judd legacy would win. Levi's temporary deputy badge felt heavy in his pocket for something so small. Sheriff Morrison gave it to him last night, along with 3 other locals, after hearing Marcus's men were planning something like an attack on the Judd homestead. "It's not the badge that makes you strong," Morrison said, pinning it on Levi's shirt. "It's doing what's needed to protect good people from harm." Now, as dawn lit Bitter Range, that idea was about to be tested. News from the past 3 days said Marcus was done with courts, choosing force instead. The will and his real identity pushed him to think destroying evidence and scaring the Judds was his only shot. Cormac stood at the house window, his grandfather's. Winchester ready, watching the land like a man who could spot danger in how riders moved or birds flew. At 52, he was still tough, but this fight would test the whole family's strength together. Positions, he called softly. Silas is at the forge watching the north path, Levi said, checking his rifle. Elias is in the barn. Loft, covering the east trail. Asher's with the horses ready to ride for help if needed. Ma's inside with the papers, like we planned. If this goes bad, she'll keep the evidence safe, even if we don't make it. The plan was solid but risky. 4 men, even on home ground, couldn't easily beat 6 or 8 pros. Their hope was to make fighting them so costly, the attackers would rather go back to court. Morning mist hid the valley, helping and hurting both sides. You could only see a few hundred yards, creating chances for surprise depending on skill and luck. Movement on the north ridge, Silas called from the forge, his voice clear in the quiet air. Cormac looked where Silas pointed, scanning. The trees for the watchers who'd been eyeing their land all week. They were getting bolder, like they wanted the Judds to know they were there. I see 4 riders, Silas said, staying in the trees, but they're setting up for something. The situation was clear. Marcus's men were circling the homestead, likely planning to demand the papers for safe passage out. It was a smart move for them. Get what they want without a fight. Levi, can you see the south path? Cormac asked. Clear so far, but the mist hides a lot. The problem was big. Levi's spot in the house gave good shots to the east and north, but the barn blocked the south. If attackers came from all sides, their defense could collapse fast. Elsa appeared beside Cormac, bringing coffee and food, knowing this might last hours. The papers are hidden like we planned, she said. Multiple copies in different spots. Even if they take the originals, we've got proof for court. Might not get to court if this goes bad, Cormac said. Then we make sure. It doesn't, Elsa said, her voice full of fight. She'd never taken defeat lightly, and she wasn't starting now with everything on the line. A rifle shot rang out, then Asher's voice from the horse paddock. Riders on the main trail, at least 6, coming fast. The bold approach meant they were either too confident or trying to trick them. Pros didn't show themselves unless they wanted to distract or felt strong enough to win easily. Stick to the plan, Cormac called. Don't shoot unless they do. We're defending our home, not starting trouble. That mattered legally. If they could claim self-defense, they'd have the town and Morrison's support. If they looked like the attackers, lawyers could twist it against them. The riders appeared through the mist, their sharp gear marking them. As hired guns, not locals with real gripes. They rode in a tight group, spaced to be hard targets but close for support. Harrison Pike led them, the lawyer who gave the first warning. His presence meant they'd keep things official, even with the threat of a fight hanging over everything. They stopped at the yard's edge, close enough to talk but far enough to avoid a quick clash. Pike got off his horse, hands empty, looking peaceful if not for the armed men behind him. Mr. Judd, Pike called, all business. I'm here for Marcus Whitmore, offering one last chance to settle this peacefully. We're listening, Cormac said from the porch, rifle ready but calm. Mr. Whitmore will pay 50,000 dollars for this land, way more than it's worth, and cover your move anywhere you want. Just agree he owns it and hand over any papers that challenge him. The offer was huge, more money than most saw in a lifetime, but it meant giving up everything they'd built. And if we say no? Cormac asked. Pike's face got stern. Then Mr. Whitmore will use his legal rights as the owner. Squatters who won't leave can be removed any way needed. The threat was wrapped in legal talk but clear. Give in or face a fight. Tell Mr. Whitmore, Cormac said slowly. This land is ours by family rights and 27 years of honest work. If he wants it, he can try in court like anyone else. I hoped you'd be smarter, Pike said. But Mr. Whitmore expected this. He waved to his men who spread out to surround the house and barns, moving like pros who'd done this before. You've got 10 minutes to change your mind, Pike said. After that, we'll assume you're fighting legal authority and we'll act. The deadline hung in the air like the fading mist. 10 minutes to give up 27 years of work. Levi, Cormac called softly. Signal the others. It's starting. Levi's badge wasn't just a symbol. It showed the town knew some fights were worth it. As he got ready to defend their home against greed and corruption, he knew these minutes would decide not just their survival but the legacy they'd leave. The homestead, built with honest work and family love, would test if those values could stand against money, violence, and the corruption that let men like Marcus thrive. Pike went back to his men, leaving the Judds 10 minutes to prepare for a fight that would decide everything they'd sacrificed for. The old survey stakes Cormac's dad carved in 1849 still marked the Judd land's true edges, their worn wood showing JJ and territorial numbers proving ownership. As Pike's 10 minutes ran out, those stakes stood for a fight about whether hard work could beat money and corruption. Sheriff Morrison rode up the main trail just in time, his badge shining in the sun with 2 deputies. His timing was planned, close enough to see any fighting, late enough not to be blamed for starting it. "Mr. Pike," Morrison called, his voice full of real law's power, "I need to see your warrants for this eviction." Pike's confidence slipped. He'd counted on his boss's money scaring local law, but Morrison was known for being honest. "Sheriff, this is a private matter between landowners. Mr. Whitmore has papers proving his rights. Then he can show them in court," Morrison said. "Till then, the Judds have the right to stay on land they've worked for 27 years. That changed everything. Morrison's presence meant any fight would be seen by fair officials, making it hard for Pike's men to claim they acted legally. Pike talked quietly with his men, their movements showing they didn't agree on what to do. They'd planned to scare the Judds without law getting involved, but Morrison messed that up. "Sheriff," Pike said, "Mr. Whitmore's claim goes back to the first territorial grants. These people are squatters who refused a fair deal to leave. That's for a judge," Morrison said firmly. "I see armed men threatening a family on their land. Without warrants, I'm ordering you to leave now." The standoff gave Elias his chance. He came from the barn with a bag of their evidence, including the will and old papers. "Sheriff Morrison," he called, "we've got proof our family owns this land, older than anything Whitmore's got." Pike's men tensed, some reaching for guns, realizing things were getting tricky. "What proof?" Morrison asked, getting off his horse and walking over. Elias pulled out the 1849 deed signed by James Judd and the will proving Cormac's inheritance. "This deed shows my grandpa claimed this land legally over 30 years ago. This will says my pa's the true heir to it all." Morrison looked closely, his knowledge of territorial law spotting real papers. The deed had the right seals and signatures. The will was complex, but looked properly done by lawyers. "These look good," Morrison said. "Mr. Pike, got anything older than 1849? Pike's silence answered. Whitmore's claim relied on fake papers and dates, nothing to beat records from the territory's start. "I need to talk to my client," Pike said. "Do that," Morrison said, "but not here. These folks have legal rights I'm sworn to protect." It could have ended there, with Pike's men leaving to plan again. But more riders came from the South. Marcus Whitmore himself led them, his fancy clothes and commanding air showing he was used to being obeyed. At 65, he was still strong, his gray hair and worn face showing a man who'd won most fights. "Sheriff Morrison," he said, getting off his horse, "this is a family matter. No need for official trouble." "Family matter?" Morrison said. "I thought you were Marcus Whitmore from Denver claiming land with old papers." The moment was here. Marcus's whole plan hid his real name and family tie. Now, with proof exposing him, he had to choose. Keep lying or admit the truth that might give his claim some weight. "I'm Marcus Judd," he said finally, ending 30 years of hiding. "That man," he pointed at Cormac, "is my nephew, son of a brother who ditched his duties and died poor because of bad choices." The crowd stirred, Pike's men looking surprised. This wasn't in their plan. Even Morrison looked shocked but stayed calm. "Then it's a family matter," Morrison said, "but it's still a legal fight for court, not guns." Cormac stepped forward, his rifle held to show skill without threat. For the first time, he faced his father's brother, who'd left James Judd to struggle alone. "Uncle Marcus," he said quietly, the words heavy with years of pain. "Pa waited for you to help. Ma said he wrote letters you never answered. He died thinking his family forgot him." "Your pa was a fool," Marcus snapped. "He picked that rocky mountain land over better valley ground." I offered help, but he wouldn't listen. He chose the land our grandpa meant for him. Cormac said, land you're trying to steal with fake papers and hired men. The accusation hung like smoke. Everyone knew this was more than land. It was about family fights brewing for decades. Morrison stepped between them, his badge shining as he took charge. The survey stakes in the distance stood quiet, watching. A fight between honest work and greed that would set the rules for their town. Cormac's letter to Elsa was never meant for others to see, written when failure seemed likely and town doubts nearly broke them. It held feelings he couldn't say out loud. Now, as the fight with his uncle peaked, Elsa pulled the letter from her Bible and gave it to him. "Read it," she said. "Let him know what we built." The letter was worn, its pages soft, marked by tears from lonely winter nights when Cormac struggled to write his heart. "My dearest Elsa," he read, his voice like a prayer to the crowd. "I know they laugh at us in town. I know they call us fools for thinking we can make something from nothing. But when I see you working with me, never whining about cold, hunger, or being alone, I see something they don't get." Marcus shifted, his fancy clothes less grand against words of deeper truth. "I see the woman who chose me, not for comfort or safety, but because she believed we could build something worth the pain. You've given me strength I didn't know I had and hope I didn't dare feel. Whatever we do here is as much yours as mine." The letter went on, telling of early struggles and small wins. Each part showed the love between two people, others called doomed. They said you deserved better than a mountain man. Maybe they were right, but you made me better than I was, better than I thought I could be. Our sons will carry your strength and wisdom, and the world will be better because of what we built. Morrison listened, knowing this was more than a land fight. The hired men shifted, their cool act shaken by words of love and family. "Enough," Marcus said sharply, but his voice wasn't sure. "This mush doesn't change who owns the land." "The facts," Cormac said, folding the letter and giving it to Elsa, "are this land is ours by family right, legal claim, and 27 years of work. Why'd you hide behind a fake name for 30 years instead of working with us to honor our grandpa's wishes?" The challenge hit Marcus's fake identity hard. As Whitmore, he was a big-shot businessman. As Marcus Judd, he was the brother who ditched family for easy money, leaving James to struggle. "I built an empire," Marcus said, angry. "Thousands of acres, businesses, power across the territory. What did your pa do? A tiny cabin and an early grave. He chose love over money, family over profit," Elsa said, her voice strong from living the letter's truth. "Success you can't buy or steal." Silence fell. Even the hired men seeing this was about different ways of life. Asher stepped up, his youth making his words stronger. "Want to know what Pa did? He raised 4 sons who'd rather die than give up what we built. That's a legacy bigger than your money." Silas, Levi, and Elias added their voices, showing family. Unity forged through years of struggle, stronger than legal tricks or cash. Morrison watched, understanding this was about whether Bitter Range's values could survive men like Marcus. "Mr. Judd," he said to Marcus, "you've got 2 choices. Drop your claim and leave them be, or face charges for fraud, threats, and planning violence." The warning was calm but firm, backed by law and town values. Pike and the men looked to Marcus, but his fancy look couldn't hide his doubt. His plan was falling apart. "This isn't over," Marcus said, but he didn't sound sure. The family's unity was something he never valued, and his hired men couldn't match people fighting for beliefs dearer than life. "It's over," Cormac said quietly. "It ended when you chose money over family. Go back to Denver, Uncle Marcus. Build on land that's not someone else's." The fight ended not with guns, but with the clear truth of 30 years of hard choices and family. Love. As Marcus and his men left, the survey stakes stood as reminders that some lines were worth defending, no matter what. The letter went back to Elsa's Bible, its words showing the strongest claim to land was written in the hearts of people who earned it with love and sacrifice. 6 months later, a new family photo was taken after the courts confirmed the Judds' ownership of their expanded land. A Denver photographer captured more than a picture. He saved a moment when 4 generations of struggle won the security they earned. Cormac stood in the middle, his hand on Elsa's shoulder, showing years of teamwork. His worn face told of battles won, his eyes showing quiet pride in proving doubters wrong. Elsa sat beside him, calm and dignified, her simple dress showing the practical values that carried her through tough years. Their 4 sons stood behind, each showing a part of the strength that built their success. Silas held his hammer, linking their fight to the town that needed his work. Levi wore his deputy badge, earned through courage and honesty. Elias held the ledger that proved their rise from nothing, key in the court win for thousands of acres. Asher stood tall, no longer the unsure youngest, but a man who found his place exposing Marcus's schemes. The homestead behind them showed not just wealth, but dreams that seemed impossible to all but the 2 who chased them. The court win was total. Marcus dropped his claim to avoid jail for fraud. His men scattered, and the courts ruled for the Judds. Their case set a standard, protecting other families from similar tricks, showing honest work could beat greed when towns stood together. "Hard to believe it's done," Elsa said, looking at the photo in their bigger living room. "It's not done," Cormac said thoughtfully. "It's just starting. We've got thousands of acres to run, duties to the town, and 4 sons, finding their paths." The duties were big. The courts gave them not just their homestead, but huge land in Bitter Range. Managing it would need careful plans and long-term thinking, like always. "Silas wants to grow his blacksmith shop," Elsa said, "talking about apprentices, maybe a second shop in Colorado Springs. Good for him. The territory needs craftsmen, and he's earned his own path. Levi's been offered a territorial marshal job, traveling Colorado to chase guys like your uncle. That's Levi, always protecting folks who can't protect themselves." They talked about each son's plans. Elias wanted to use his trading skills to find new markets for their cows and crops. Asher was interested in the mountain land, maybe mining or timber for more money. "And us?" Elsa asked quietly. "We've spent 27 years building this. What now that we've got it all?" It was a big question about what success meant for people who lived for struggle and big dreams. The poverty and doubt of their early days were gone, replaced by security beyond their hopes. "We do what we always did," Cormac said after thinking. "We work, build, and care for those who need us. Now it's by choice, not need." That difference mattered. They used to fight to prove doubters wrong. Now they worked to honor the values that made them win. Over months, the Judds became leaders in Bitter Range. Their bigger ranch gave jobs to dozens of families. Their money built schools and churches, and their example showed hard work and teamwork could beat anything. The town that once mocked them now looked to them for advice on business and disputes. They'd gone from laughed at to respected, from struggling to the territory's top family. But the biggest change was how they saw themselves. No longer insecure, but confident, satisfied they'd proved their worth to themselves. "Think about those early days?" Elsa asked one evening on their bigger porch. "Every day," Cormac said, "but different now. I don't think of the hard times. I see how it all prepared us for this. The folks who laughed think they get what we did?" Cormac watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, the valley showing what 2 people could do when they believed in each other. "Some do, some don't," he said, "but it doesn't matter. We didn't build this for them. We built it because we knew what we could do together." The family photo sat between them, its careful poses capturing decades of struggle turned into security. The real win wasn't in the picture, papers, or land. It was knowing they chose each other well and built something that would last, carried by sons and a town that learned what honest partnership could do against any odds.